You've been told frozen seafood is safe, flash frozen, preserved, lab tested. But how do you explain radioactive shrimp hitting Walmart freezers in 2025?
The shrimp may be radioactive. The FDA says certain great value raw frozen shrimp is contaminated with cesium-137.
How do you justify nearly 45,000 pounds of contaminated seafood recalled in silence? And how come multiple brands, different names, same factory, are still lining shelves like nothing happened? These aren't rumors. These are federal recalls. Cesium-137, listeria, uninspected catfish fillets sold across southern states with zero federal oversight. And you're supposed to feed this to your family. How much of your trust is based on glossy packaging and sale tags? When was the last time you traced where your seafood came from? Not the logo, not the barcode, the truth. This isn't about fear. It's about realizing what's being hidden in plain sight. Today we're pulling back the freezer curtain. We're exposing 5 frozen seafood brands you need to avoid at all costs. And for those who still care about safe choices, we found 2 rare names that actually deserve your trust. Let's begin. Number 1, Kroger Mercado. You might assume those green-striped bags of Kroger Mercado cooked medium peeled tail-off shrimp are just another bargain in the freezer aisle. But right now that bargain is sitting on a thin line between safe and seriously risky. Food safety regulators recalled about 18,000 2-pound bags of this shrimp from Kroger stores across 17 states because they might be contaminated with cesium-137, a radioactive isotope that does not belong near your dinner plate. What looks like frozen convenience may carry invisible danger. Here's what's laid bare: the shrimp were sold between July 24 and August 11 with lot codes 10662539 and 10662540. Best. Before dates are November 19th, 2027 and November 20th, 2027. The packaging is clear plastic with a white label edged in green at top. All visible, all normal until you know what was detected further up the supply line. The supplier linked to this recall is PT Bahari Makmur Sejati, an Indonesian processor whose shipping containers were found by U.S. Customs to have traces of Ces-137 at major ports, such as Los Angeles, Houston, Miami, and Savannah. Even though no batch of Kroger Mercado shrimp has officially tested positive in stores, yet the FDA warns that these shrimp may have been prepared or held under unsanitary conditions that could have allowed contamination. Label says cooked medium peeled tail off, but doesn't say anything like may contain radioactive isotopes. Notice this: the detected level in earlier tests was about 68 becquerels per kilogram, far under the U.S. action threshold of 1,200 becquerels per kilogram. That number is scarily technical, but here's what it means: one-time exposure may not blow up into headline illness, but repeated exposure over months or years can wear you down. Your body does not always repair every damaged cell. The recall cover is sweeping, affecting Baker's, Mariano's, Metro Market, Pick and Save, and other stores in states including Alabama, Georgia, Illinois, Virginia, Michigan, Wisconsin, West Virginia, and more. What compounds this is that many brands using the same processor are being recalled. Different name tags, same source. The system that should protect you, FDA inspections, import alerts, oversight of overseas facilities, has cracks. The catch that so many slips through: once processed offshore, once in large volumes, tracing back becomes harder. Public warnings, slower labels, less transparent. You pay mouthwatering savings thinking you are getting cooked shrimp, fast meals, clean protein. Meanwhile, risk factors stack up: unsanitary housing or holding conditions, radioactive trace contamination, batch codes that nobody checks, lots that look harmless. And for people with weakened immune systems or older age, shrimps with invisible harms can be especially dangerous. You deserve full clarity. Check your freezer now. If you see Kroger Mercado cooked medium peeled tail-off shrimp with those lot codes, those best before dates, return it or throw it away. Don't let clean packaging fool you. Next, I will walk you through even more brands hiding similar threats and then show you 2 rare seafood names you can actually trust. Let's keep exposing what's been buried under frozen flesh. Number 2, great value.
Now to a recall of frozen shrimp sold at Walmart. People are being told to throw it away after shrimp in a shipment was found to be contaminated with radioactive material.
Don't settle for cheap shrimp without asking where every single pound came from and how it was handled. The Great Value brand's frozen raw shrimp sold at Walmart just got hit with a warning that turns bargain shopping into a risk no one should ignore. Regulators discovered that some shipments from a big supplier in Indonesia, PT Bahari Makmur Sejati, were tied to shipping containers flagged for possible cesium-137 contamination. That's a radioactive isotope born from nuclear processes and rarely tested for in food. Even though the shrimp now on shelves have not officially been measured above the legal danger threshold, they are believed to have been prepared, packed, or stored under unsanitary conditions that might have let contamination creep in anyway. What appears on the label as raw frozen shrimp could hide invisible risks that build up over time. Imagine buying a 2-pound bag thinking you're getting protein, paying with trust in Great Value's reputation for value. Yet the same supplier has already been tied to seize shipments at major U.S. ports Los Angeles, Houston, Miami, Savannah, where customs agents found cesium in containers meant for import. That means somewhere in the supply chain, environmental control or quality checks broke down badly. It might be contamination beginning in water or cross-contamination in the factory or slack oversight at overseas exporting sites. No matter where the risk reaches your table. What's especially unsettling, regulators recommend avoiding those particular bags even though current test results suggest levels are low and below the threshold for acute danger. But low doesn't mean zero. Repeated exposure to low-level radiation over many months or years is how damage stacks up damage to DNA-elevated cancer risk, especially in older folks or anyone with weakened defenses. When you shop with thin margins, you end up paying a heavier price in health over time. Policy-wise, this incident highlights a huge gap. Imported frozen seafood is supposed to go through inspections, but many products slip through when the initial detection happens after products have already entered the commerce chain. The law says food must not be prepared, packed, or held under insanitary conditions, but enforcement hinges on inspections, port tests, traceability. When traceability fails, names, lot codes, best by dates must serve as your only warning signals. And the public rarely hears the full story. Think also about the impact beyond the freezer. Communities relying on affordable sources of protein, older households, people with compromised immune systems, they are the most exposed. This is not just a shrimp recall. It is evidence that regulatory oversight can lag, that cost saving and sourcing overseas may come at the expense of safety, that consumer trust in big brands can be weaponized by gaps in supply chain integrity. Walmart responded by removing affected products from impacted stores, offering refunds. That matters. But what about the products already in home freezers? What about the ones still being shipped under similar processing conditions? What about long-term effects for people who've been eating these bags often without any visible warning signs? You deserve to know more than what's printed. When you go into Walmart, glance for Great Value raw frozen shrimp check labels, lot codes, best by dates. If anything seems suspicious, dispose of those bags. Talk to store managers. Demand transparency from suppliers. Because once trust is gone, it takes strong action to bring it back. Now we'll move to number 3, because the problem doesn't stop at Walmart or Great Value. The patterns are spreading. Stay alert, stay demanding of what you feed your body. Number 3, Bornstein Seafoods. It is shocking to realize food marketed as fully cooked and safe can carry a hidden danger. Bornstein Seafoods recently had to pull tens of thousands of pounds of cold water shrimp meat from shelves after routine tests detected Listeria monocytogenes lurking in the processing environment. What feels like convenient shrimp that's already peeled, cleaned, and ready to eat turns out to be a risk nobody asked for. The product was distributed in target regions of the Pacific Northwest and Canada, but warnings suggest it may have been shipped farther. Retailers in multiple states sold plastic bags marked simply as shrimp that are part of this recall. Healthy packaging and bold logos offered comfort, yet safety violations occurred upstream in processing. Testing caught the bacteria before it reached you, but depending on how quickly recalls propagate, some bags may already be in freezers across the country. Listeria's danger is especially real for people whose bodies cannot bounce back easily. Elderly individuals, Young children, pregnant people, all are at increased risk. What feels like a harmless shrimp cocktail could lead to illness in vulnerable homes. What seems like a quick dinner might introduce bacterial danger that hides in the cold chain and factory drains and sanitation corners forgotten. Beyond individual risk, the recall surfaces deeper failures in oversight and policy. The system relies on random sampling and spot checks. Facilities may not have regular inspections, especially when their products cross state or national lines before final sale. Labeling laws require many descriptive details, but they rarely demand notice of pathogen risk. Buyers trust brands believe products are safe because they are cooked and peeled. When recalls reveal that label and reality do not always match, trust fractures. Companies like Bornstein marketed these shrimp with images of cold water and clean sourcing, reinforcing belief in purity. Yet even using sea or cold water imagery cannot erase exposure risk from bacterial contamination. That's how suspicion grows, not only toward this product, but toward the entire concept of ready-to-eat frozen seafood. If a respected brand fails to prevent contamination in cooked product, what about others? Consumers deserve more than recall notices after the fact. There should be transparent reporting when inspections occur, when pathogens are found, and what corrective actions ensue. What are the hygiene standards inside processing plants? How often do inspections happen? Are processing lines cleaned in a way that leaves zero bacteria risk? All this matters when the food is supposed to be pure and safe. Take action at home right now. If you have any bags of shrimp labeled as cooked, peeled, ready to eat under the Bornstein name, scan your freezer carefully. If the product looks like what was pulled in, the recall, throw it away, or return it. Do not assume heating or washing fixes a ready-to-eat product. That process is supposed to ensure safety already. Do not wait for symptoms or news to catch up. The recall itself may save some people, but it does not heal the betrayal of expectations. You believe that cooked meant safe. You believe peeled meant processed under conditions no pathogen could survive. This recall demands you question those beliefs, demand accountability, demand better oversight. Up next in the avoid list, the next brand reveals another layer of system failure. Stay alert. Keep demanding more from companies and regulatory agencies. Your freezer should be a place of nourishment, not danger. Number 4, Sandbar. You would think by now the seafood industry would have cleaned up its act. After all, how many times can a single supply chain get caught before someone steps in? And yet here we are again with Sandbar Shrimp joining a growing list of frozen seafood brands flagged for safety concerns. The label changes. The promises change. But the problems, they follow the same blueprint. Sandbar, often found in freezer aisles of national chains and discount grocers, markets itself as a reliable choice for families looking for convenience without compromise. Yet, underneath the glossy packaging lies a truth consumers were never meant to see. Its connection to overseas processing centers flagged in ongoing federal import alerts is not a coincidence. It's a symptom of a deeper illness, one where shortcuts, questionable hygiene standards, and regulatory blind spots have become the norm rather than the exception. Let's not dance around it. This brand has been tied to a wider recall involving shrimp that may have been packed in conditions described by authorities as insanitary. What exactly does that mean? It means that what's labeled as clean, pre-cooked, or frozen for freshness could have passed through hands and surfaces that didn't meet minimum cleanliness standards. It means the packaging might look sterile while the production line wasn't. And while some might shrug and say, well, no one's gotten sick yet, that mindset misses the forest for the trees. The goal should never be damage control after something goes wrong. The goal should be not putting people in danger to begin with. Because every time a recall happens, it's not just a label being questioned, it's a supply chain, a system of promise. Here's what makes this case worse. Sandbar is not some fringe product tucked in the corner of an obscure market. It's everywhere. It shares suppliers, distribution hubs, and shipping channels with other household brands. That means one tainted facility has the potential to infect a dozen trusted labels. By the time one brand rings the alarm, others have already made it to your cart. For older shoppers, for anyone on a fixed income, for anyone trying to stretch a grocery budget, this kind of betrayal cuts deep. You buy frozen shrimp thinking it's a smart, affordable source of protein. You stock up on multi-packs when they're on sale, trusting the freezer will keep them safe. You don't expect to be caught in the middle of a recall web, wondering if your dinner carries a hidden risk. What's more disturbing is the silence. Brands like Sandbar rarely address these issues publicly. They leave it to government bulletins and media footnotes. They trust the noise will fade and shelves will refill. But what does that say about accountability? What does it say about the value they place on the people buying their products? If there's one thing to learn here, it's this: consistency in branding does not mean consistency in safety. Just because a logo looks familiar doesn't mean the process behind it is. Just because a product claims quality doesn't mean it delivers. We are dealing with a game of labels, not a guarantee of standards. Next, we move on to the fifth and final name in the list you should avoid. At this point, it's no longer just a few bad apples, it's a broken orchard. And it's time to ask, how much longer are we going to tolerate it? Number 5, quality poultry and seafood. Picture something many take for granted: that frozen or retail catfish fillets you buy have been checked by federal inspectors. Now imagine those same fillets were made without any federal inspection. That is exactly what authorities found when Quality Poultry and Seafood of Biloxi, Mississippi recalled nearly 99,000 pounds of frozen catfish products because they were produced without the legal safety check required by USDA regulations. Something is seriously wrong in the system when so much catfish shipped to stores and restaurants in 3 states and sold from their own retail location is allowed to leave the plant without inspection. These are not just obscure batches, these are common frozen catfish fillets, miscut packages, random fillets labeled farmed, raised, packed in bulk, and repackaged, ending up in retail freezers and menus alike. The concern from regulatory agencies is that food produced without inspection may hide undeclared allergens, harmful bacteria, or other unnoticed contaminants that put health at risk. No illnesses have officially been linked so far. That might sound reassuring until you remember how many cases go unreported because symptoms mimic mild stomach upset or food poisoning, and because cooked catfish is a staple in so many southern kitchens. When inspection is skipped altogether, there is no guarantee that freezing alone eliminated risk. Cold does not kill everything, and contamination before freezing can persist. This recall spans products produced over more than a year, showing that the lapse was not a slip, but an ongoing oversight. From September 2024 through early September 2025, these catfish fillets were processed, repackaged, shipped. The labels may not point to any wrongdoing. Names may vary. Packaging may look legitimate. Logo familiar. Yet the invisible violation is that federal inspection was never part of the process for certain parts of the operation. That gap matters. Policy demands that all catfish sold in the U.S. undergo USDA inspection. That process includes sanitation checks, testing for pathogens, ensuring clean water supply, checking processing surfaces. When parts of production are outside inspection, that means corners could be cut. Suppliers may use water or ice that is not tested. Facilities may reuse equipment without thorough sterilization. Tracking becomes harder. Accountability becomes weaker. Think about what this means for people shopping on tight budgets, older adults living on fixed incomes, or anyone trying to avoid surprises at the doctor's office. When you buy frozen catfish believing USA farm raised, you assume safety, assuming oversight. When that assumption fails, you are exposed. It is not just about what's in the catfish. It is about trusting food labels, trusting regulators to enforce rules, trusting companies to follow them. Some retailers and restaurants may have already served or sold these products. That raises a question few ask: how often do we eat without knowing inspection status? How often do we assume what farm-raised or frozen fillet implies cleanliness and safety? When that trust is abused, damage isn't just physical, it shakes belief in institutions and brands. For anyone with these catfish fillets in their freezer, check where you bought them. If they came from Quality Poultry and Seafood in Alabama, Mississippi, or Louisiana, discard or return them. Do not rely on recalls being widely communicated. Many rural or small stores may never get the full message. And do not assume that cooking thoroughly will neutralize all potential hazards. This recall demands accountability, full integration of the repackaging processes under federal inspection, stronger oversight of facilities that convert bulk packs into retail sizes, better labeling of what inspection cover is, and what is not transparency about when inspection is missing. Consumers deserve to know what they are feeding themselves and their families, especially when frozen is supposed to mean preserved, safe, reliable. We've now seen 5 brands in this avoid list. The pattern is harsh, uninspected facilities, hidden contaminants, regulatory delays, broken trust. Next, I will shift to 2 rare seafood names that actually rise above this mess. You will want to know what they get right and why they may still deserve your trust. Number 1, Trident Seafoods. Amid all the recalls, the packaging swaps, the label tricks, it is rare to find a seafood brand that steps forward and takes food safety as more than just buzzword marketing. Trident Seafoods is one of those rare names. While no brand is flawless, the safety record and the response pattern of Trident make it safer than most in this troubled frozen seafood landscape. First, Trident has shown willingness to recall when issues are caught not after public outrage, but at earlier stages. For example, when small pieces of plastic were discovered in certain cod products, Trident did not wait until consumers reported harm. They pulled products voluntarily and notified retailers. That helps limit risk rather than magnify it. Second, Trident maintains visible standards in labeling and allergen declaration. When a product under their umbrella mistakenly omitted egg white on a seafood imitation product, they issued a recall once that oversight was discovered. You see transparency there, admitting mistake, owning it, fixing the record. That degree of openness matters deeply when trust has been shaken in this frozen realm. Third, audits, third-party certifications, and ongoing quality checks seem part of their process, not afterthoughts. Wild Alaska pollock, salmon, burgers, cod, many of the species Trident processes are under tighter regulatory scrutiny because of market expectations and export demands. That means inspection access, traceability of catch, and test results are more readily available or demanded by partners. It is not silence, but accountability. Of course, risk is never zero. Even Trident has had recalls for foreign object contamination, metal pieces in salmon burgers sold at Costco, and issues in imitation crab-style seafood. But what distinguishes Trident is how quickly corrective actions happen, how visible the recall notices are, how often the company communicates with retailers and consumers. In the world of frozen seafood, speed matters. Transparency matters. Remediation matters. For households watching budgets, for older adults counting every dollar, and doubting every label, for anyone who has been burned by cheap shrimp or endangered by weak oversight, Trident represents a somewhat safer landing zone. When you choose a Trident frozen fillet or burger, you still need to inspect packaging, check best by dates, and store conditions. But with Trident, those steps are more likely to match what's actually inside. What to look for when picking a Trident product: packaging that clearly lists origin, species, whether wild-caught or farm-raised, allergen information, proper frozen seal, and minimal processing or breading. Products with fewer added ingredients generally carry lower risk of hidden issues. Refrigeration chain matters. Did it stay frozen solid? Freezer burn or multiple thaw refreeze events. Often a company lacks oversight somewhere back in the supply line. Trident may not have earned perfection, not yet. But in contrast to brands tied to radioactive shrimp scares, uninspected facilities, or undeclared allergens, it performs significantly better. Your freezer deserves brands that don't just sell safety in words but follow up in deeds. Trident largely does. Up next in the safe list is Safe Harbor certified seafood, which takes a different route towards safety through rigorous independent testing and certifications. Let's see why that one might be your best bet after Trident. Number 2, Safe Harbor certified seafood. Among all the brands tossing around words like clean, pure, and safe, few actually submit to a system of third-party oversight that means anything. Safe Harbor certified seafood is one of the rare exceptions. They do not just talk about safety, they quantify it. Every piece of fish that carries the Safe Harbor label is mercury tested individually. Not a sample, not a batch. Every single piece. That is not just unusual in the seafood industry. It is virtually unheard of. While others rely on broad claims, Safe Harbor publishes their maximum mercury levels for each species and compares them directly against FDA standards. They are not playing hide and seek with test results. They are telling you upfront what you are eating, For fish like ahi tuna swordfish or Chilean sea-based species, often flagged for high mercury levels, this level of individual testing matters more than people realize. Mercury is not removed by cooking. It does not fade in the freezer, and it does not come with a warning label unless the brand puts it there. Safe Harbor does. That transparency creates something too rare these days: earned trust. What makes this certification different is its basis in data. They use proprietary technology that delivers fast readings, and the mercury limits they accept are lower than what the federal government allows. That means their standards are tighter than what is legally required. When a company chooses to exceed the minimum, that is a signal. They are not doing just enough to get by. They are drawing a line higher and holding themselves to it. You may not find Safe Harbor everywhere. It is more common in higher-end grocery chains, certain restaurant suppliers, and online direct order. That limited distribution does not make it elite. It makes it selective. And in an industry where mass production often comes at the cost of safety, that selectiveness might be exactly the filter needed. Older adults, those with compromised immune systems, pregnant women, these groups are all especially vulnerable to heavy metals in fish. Mercury is not a quick poison. It builds, quietly affects cognition, balance, memory. It mimics the slow drift of aging until it is too late to trace. That is why labeling matters. That is why data transparency matters. That is why companies like Safe Harbor are not optional anymore. They are essential. To be clear, no brand can promise zero risk, but brands can promise full testing. Brands can publish results. Brands can invite scrutiny. That is what Safe Harbor does. And in contrast to the 5 brands we just exposed, brands caught hiding radiation risks, skipping inspection, or dodging accountability. Safe Harbor feels like breathing room. When you pick up seafood from this label, you are not just buying dinner. You are buying back a little clarity. You are reclaiming the right to know. And in this climate of broken trust, that is not a small thing. That is your protection. That is your choice. And that is why Safe Harbor closes our list of the rare few still worth your freezer space. The seafood aisle used to be a place of comfort, but now it's a minefield. We've just walked through 5 frozen brands that shattered that trust, and only 2 that are still holding the line. This isn't about preference. It's about protection. Because behind every pretty label could be a system failing you slow recalls, hidden contaminants, corporate silence. So before you stock your freezer next time, pause. Read. Question. Remember what we uncovered today. You are not just feeding your body. You're placing your trust in a chain that starts at the boat, passes through hands you'll never see, and lands on your dinner plate. Choose wisely, and let your cart be your protest. This isn't fear, it's clarity. Let them feel it.
This video does not promote division within the United States or encourage segregation. All content is presented for the purpose of exploration, analysis, and fostering discussion based on current events, public sentiment, and social trends. We fully respect the United States Constitution and all federal regulations. If today's analysis made you think, drop a comment so we can keep the conversations going. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you will never miss our next independent deep dive.